Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the AI Spy. It's been a while actually since we recorded and released our last episode. Been busy with work, holidays, hurricanes, lots of things happening. I apologize for the delay, but I really hope that you are following and finding some of the content that we recorded previously useful. Our last episode was with Christian Leubrecht. We spoke about his book Dirty Money and Money Laundering in Canada. So please go check that out. Today on this podcast is our first returning guest, Dan Fernandez. Dan was one of my first guests. Actually, he was the second guest that I recorded with. And at that time, it was early 2023. We're in the highs of ChatGPT being just made publicly available. And we spoke about how using public LLMs like ChatGPT could expose one to cybersecurity or privacy risks. That episode is still date our most viewed, listened to episode. So Dan, I am hoping, welcome to the show, and I'm hoping that this one is going to beat the last episode.
Well, that's a tall order. I'm sure it was the topic that attracted most of the views. But yeah, happy to be with you on again, and yeah, looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So today, Dan, we'll talk about cybersecurity trends. We'll talk about how cyber criminals have embraced AI and generative AI. So let's dive into the topic. Like I said, we spoke earlier when we spoke. I think it was summer or even spring of 2023 when we spoke about how using LLMs could expose one to risk. Like if you're entering any sensitive data, we spoke about prompt hacking, things like that. But I want to talk about how now cyber criminals have made generative AI their own. There are even versions of GPTs that cyber criminals have created. And how are they leveraging this in phishing, malware, and other attacks?
Yeah, for sure. I think not to scare anybody out there, but it's definitely getting a little bit worse. There's been a few advancements in the technology, not just for text generation, but also audio and video generation that have made it a little bit worse. So let's start with like deepfake. So for those of you that are not familiar, a deepfake is a synthetically generated piece of content, which could be a video or audio conversation. We have seen some companies out there that now allow you to clone someone's voice. This could be interesting for maybe you're generating product description content about your own organization, but it obviously could be used nefariously by someone to grab any audio that is available out there, like this podcast, for example, and someone could basically feed it a minute or so of our audio, of our video, and it could potentially clone our voices and then now reach out to, I don't know, my parents or a family member and start requesting perhaps funds or something like that. So criminals are now using AI to create very highly convincing audio and video, even of executives and employees. And this is starting to facilitate also business email compromise and other types of scams, where before everybody's probably familiar with the age-old text message from your CEO of your organization that asks you to do something very urgent. But now with both voice and potentially video, there's been cases where companies have been tricked into doing this. Another area that has continued to evolve, obviously we've seen a lot of large language models have been released that get better and better over time at different tasks. And this also facilitates the potential of a personalized phishing campaign. Now you can craft a more on-brand, grammatically correct phishing text message, email message, etc. And using these language models allows you to even tune it to specific writing styles. Again, you can say, hey, look at Dan's blog or Anurag's blog, and based on the way that he communicates, craft a email message or a text message for that. And then lastly, just to cover at a high level, it's like we still see malware used for credential stealing, and the use of AI-powered malware or using AI to generate new variants of malware could also help an attacker kind of like deliver more and more variants of a credential stealing piece of software or just something that keystroke log or whatever the case may be to start gathering more. So in short, a lot of great advancements in the technology, but all of them unfortunately can be used in a negative way by the wrong people for sure.
Right. And I have a follow-up question, but before that, you gave me an opportunity for a plug. So if anyone who's listening, watching is not familiar with Deepfakes, Season 2, Episode 1, we spoke to Matthew Wright. about deepfakes and how deepfakes can be used for fraud generation. He unpacked some of the technology that goes into creating deepfakes. Matt Wright also runs a project called the Deepfake Project, where they can help identify deepfakes. So go listen to that episode. Great episode, great insights from Matthew. Now, Dan, coming back to the topic, you said AI powered malware and phishing campaigns. So we do see this as an increasing threat, like AI generated phishing campaigns. And you said like the accuracy of the phishing emails can be very on point now. It's because it's not a human writing them. It can be perfect. Sometimes I feel like it's too perfect because humans should have some, like I miss the comma, I mess up my punctuations, I in my spelling you'll see a US and UK style spelling all mixed up. So those are human issues that you should expect. So phishing emails are getting, but there's also the QR scam. So can you talk a little more about the phishing, AI generated phishing and QR scams?
Yeah. So for AI phishing, I mean, what it allows the attacker to do is to rapidly generate very large volumes of content. So previously, you have to think very closely to create a very broad and generic message that would apply to, you'll send like, I don't know, 1,000 emails to 1,000 different recipients, and it would be the same template kind of like getting sent out. What AI allows you to do is that you can say, hey, for this particular email, based on what I know about them, please craft a message that is relevant to something that they would actually interact with. So this level of automation basically allows you to do this at an infinite scale. So obviously, if you were doing this for 1,000 individuals as a single person, you wouldn't do it. But now that these AI tools are available, it's possible to do this at scale. And the downside of that is that the click-through rates of like the likelihood that someone is going to click on that malicious email link or attachment or whatever is going to be significantly higher if you make it more relevant. So the Gen AI tools are basically allowing the bad actors to hone their craft on what is the most effective type of email to write. Related to this, there's also been a trend, has been reported a couple of times by a publication called 404 Media. There's a number of tools out there that are doing quote unquote automated doxing. And what that means is that you could start from an identifier where there's a social media profile, an email address, a phone number, or even just a picture of a person. And in the past, what you would do is that you kind of like do people search engines and maybe use data broker sites that aggregate public records and public information and be able to gather additional open source intelligence associated with that person. But there's tools out there that come in the form of a Telegram bot or even like dedicated apps that basically for a fee as low as sometimes 10 to 15 US dollars, you can now enter a piece of data for anyone and then get a report about everything that is known about that person. Now, if you think about combining the new AI capabilities of like having multiple agents where maybe you have an agent that writes the email and you have an agent that analyzes the output of that profile, you can now have a fully automated pipeline where you can say, here's a list of people that I want to target. Please generate reports for each one of them. Based on that report, now craft an email message or voice note or whatever the case may be that is going to be highly successful at getting them to do something that they don't want to do. So I think that's an interesting combination of tools that were already out there, data that was already out there, but because of the level of automation that these generative AI tools bring, makes it a little bit worse. And then for QR codes, I think it's interesting. Obviously, we know that as part of the pandemic, there was a widespread use of QR codes to replace things like menus at restaurants, but there's definitely an increase in prevalence in general of QR codes in general. We even see them maybe in Super Bowl ads where it's like, hey, here's the follow-up. It's a quick way. Everybody has a mobile device. You scan that, and it takes you to where they want you to land. However, it is possible for those QR codes to also be generated by a bad actor and take you to a phishing website or take you to somewhere that they can potentially steal your credentials, etc. The good thing about that is that, I think is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Like one thing to point out is that if you are scanning QR codes, there are apps that validate that what you're scanning is in fact what it is. Like maybe you see a random banner outside a store and you think it's a QR code for that store. There are tools out there that would kind of like preview and sandbox that link before actually opening it. that if you go directly with your camera, you are just going to go straight to whatever the target is on that link. So some little advice there
No,
to help protect yourself.
that's awesome because the number of places I see QR codes, parking meters, we are familiar with. But even I am one of those people that still watches television with ads in between. And yesterday I saw that there's an ad where someone is vacuuming the floor, and there's a QR code right there which takes you to Amazon where you can actually buy the product. And it's if you're a cyber criminal, it's you can have ad placement. I'm not saying they're doing it, but it opens up the possibility because we are on our phones all the time, and I think the marketing people understand that. So do the cyber criminals.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, that's a great that's a great point. I think malvertising in traditional search engine results has been a thing, as you pointed out. Actually, if you go to in certain maybe from the listeners, like the company that you belong to, in some companies, I know in my home network, my wife is pretty annoyed at the fact that I block the advertising links in our firewall for our local network. You could go ahead and block those advertising links, so the first few links that come out in a Google search result would not work, because there's been multiple cases of bad actors, to your point, where it's like you throw some ad dollars at the problem,
Yeah.
and you can have someone click on your malicious link instead of whatever they were trying to Google for. That would be successful. But what you brought up is also pretty interesting, and there's a lot of, whether you're watching, I guess, traditional television, not so much, but even all the digital media you consume on YouTube, etc., handles itself through programmatic ads. So as you described, it could be that someone introduces, and because of the hyper targeting that is possible today, including, like, I don't know, lives ago I worked in advertising technology, and you could target by email, but if you know the email of someone, you could potentially also target them with advertisement that contains the QR code. So yeah, I think it's yet another threat vector to be aware of and to think about as you're living.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing these three. The one you mentioned, I want to get the term right, where you can provide a picture and an email and it searches everything. That's called, what is it called again? It's doxing?
Yeah, so I don't know if that's the right terminology, but I think that's
Okay.
the way this 404 media publication will refer to it. But yeah, it's essentially automating the process of gathering all the known open source intelligence about someone,
Yeah.
and just combining that into one place.
Excellent. I will add the link from 404 Media. Excellent publication. They do some really great work. They won't appear on my podcast, but they do really great work. So I will still add their link. Then going through this, I wanted to ask you about ransomwares. I mean, 2023, we saw a few big cases. 2024, there have been a few. So ransomware continues to be a massive issue, and I think it will also continue to be in the future. I think it's safe to say it will continue. So we've heard about some new tactics in ransomware, like using password protected payloads. What have you seen? What are the new trends that you see in new or existing trends that continue to dominate that you see in ransomware attacks?
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I mean, I'll go back to what we covered previously and briefly say that the increased capabilities for social engineering through synthetic video generation, voice generation, phishing, etc., compounds the problem, because the first thing you need to deploy a ransomware is to get access to your target, and that initial access kind of has become a little bit more easy to a degree, right, with all these tools. So I think one of the trends that we'll probably continue to see is that initial access could get easier with these tools. But what you brought up is also very interesting, and that is the increasing prevalence of this multi-stage payloads and attacks, where, yeah, maybe the initial delivery mechanism is a password protected file, which typically a email detection tool may not have access to the contents because it's obviously password protected. And then in the later stages, that file could contain, or even it may be a benign file. It doesn't even have to be a password protected file. It could contain scripts or other tooling that continue and download additional encrypted ransomware payload. And this approach just makes it difficult for the security teams to detect and respond to these type of attacks. And similar to that is innovative types of ransomware strains that use that password protection as a way to more broadly obfuscate their payloads altogether. And I think it makes it, unless you can crack that encryption method that they use, there's very little for the protection and the software that's available to help people prevent that. And the other thing to note here is that obviously this ransomware gangs are kind of like targeting multiple attack vectors. So we think about the usual ones, email and text messages, but there's a lot of messaging platforms. There's a lot of professional communications that happen over shared Slack servers for professionals of the same group that share, and now you're like on a corporate device on a Slack server that is not your company Slack server. That's a potential vector. Collaboration tools that people use, like document sharing, and those things. So I think that's the general challenge, is like the increased number of attack vectors.
Okay, thanks for that. My final question would be, looking forward, how do you think AI will continue to shape the cybercrime landscape? And if you had to advise, what should organizations, individuals prioritize to stay ahead of these threats?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the great opportunities and challenges is that the AI technologies are moving very fast. So it's a bit difficult to predict what exactly will happen. As you mentioned, when we last spoke, it was like a little over a year ago, and just the quality of the models and the available tools associated with Gen AI applications have exploded in number. So I think it's going to be hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. But I think what we can definitely not predict, but know that's going to happen, is that there will continue to be more automation. So just like we're seeing, or like we mentioned earlier, that you can combine now the researching of your target and the generation of custom tailored content for that target. And now that could be like a simple chatbot that you enter just the person you're targeting, and it takes care of the rest. Like that increased automation would make large scale attacks or broader attacks more feasible and more effective, because the victims are potentially more susceptible to the type of text or audio that they're receiving. So that just means more sophisticated social engineering. And then on the adaptive malware front, it'll be interesting to see how AI continues to potentially help malware, like bad actors, write better malware, or write malware that is undetectable by the protection systems that are in place. That is definitely a scary use or weapon, is like making large language models a weapon for malware development as opposed to a defense mechanism. And lastly, I wanted to end with, maybe it's not a novel idea, but something that becomes more possible now, of like AI-powered credential attacks. So for those not familiar, typically when there's like a data breach, you can go through a database and see credentials that get leaked and exposed. And there are automated ways for bad actors to kind of like go through, okay, let's test the most popular passwords known, and what's known as like a dictionary attack, where you have here are the top 10,000 most popular passwords, and let's try to unlock these accounts and do bad things with them. Now, if you have an AI-powered credential attack and you have that automated doxing that knows that you have a podcast called AI Spy, and knows where you work, and knows what you do, and where you're from, and the school you went to, and when you graduated college, and all these things, you can imagine that these AI-powered credential attacks could be more targeted. So just like those phishing emails are now more specific, more granular, maybe the guesses that are thrown out from these AI-powered credential attacks are more specific, and there's a potential higher likelihood of like opening up an account. I'm merely speculating. I don't have at the moment any specific data to back this up, but that's definitely something worth noting. And I guess I'll plug another cybersecurity advice there, is like, if you're not using a password manager and you're still manually creating your own passwords, you should definitely stop doing that. Phones like Apple devices, Google devices nowadays all have a password manager. So just make sure that you have a machine-generated password, so that it's even harder for an AI-powered credential attacker potentially to access your data or your files. So yeah.
So that makes, even though you don't have data, it logically that makes sense. So the responses that these LLMs provide, the more context you can provide them, the better the response is. So with doxing and other techniques, so if I know who I'm hacking and I can provide context, so the dictionary search is sharper. So if I see through a data breach, soccer fan at 1994, I know, okay, this is a mid-aged person. 1994 was when they got into soccer or whatever. Or Messi, Lionel Messi, Messi forever, or Messi goat, something. I know, okay. So now my guidance to generate the dictionaries will be more targeted, more focused, and could result in better. It'll be better. That it's just I'm not advising any or giving ideas to anyone how to do credential stuffing, but it just helps us know what we are fighting against and how we can protect. And just the advice that you plugged, I think it's perfect. I will also take that opportunity to plug an episode that we recorded with Francis West last year in Cybersecurity Month 2023. He shared all the timeline of all the data breaches and how a password manager can really help. And we even have a demo of that on the episode. So please go check that out. I think password managers should be commonplace. Everyone should be using one. And if you're not, please look into whatever works for you. I'm not saying you have to use the one that we featured, but there are many of those that are available that you can use. Dan, always great talking to you. Thank you for sharing these insights. And where can people find you? I follow you on LinkedIn. I see your posts. So is that the best place to find you, or are there other spots to follow you?
Yeah, definitely. LinkedIn, I'm most active. Twitter or X sometimes, but not really active. I would say, yeah, for more long form written content and just random takes on random things. Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. I guess I'll plug now. I'm mostly focusing on supply chain security around minimizing vulnerabilities. So I'm also trying to write more and put more out there regarding like how to minimize vulnerabilities and why you should do that. So yeah,
I think that could be a potential third episode with you. I was just reading about North Korean actors specifically targeting supply chains. So maybe that's for another time, another episode. But Dan, thank you so much for taking time out. And I think our listeners will really value your insights. I learned something new today. So thanks for taking time out. And this was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always happy to join.
So everyone, until the next episode, thank you, and signing off. I'm Anurag, your host, and we'll be back again with another A-lister, another great episode talking about AI and financial crime. Thank you.